Hello, this is Darren from darrenscorner.com. Today I'm going to show you part one out of a five-part video tutorial series on how to integrate PHP into various Tumult hype projects. Please take a look in the comments down below to download the example files that I'll be using in these exercises. To start with, though, we're going to do a little bit of theory and talk about the difference between JavaScript, which is a client-side language, and PHP, which is a server-side language. So we have this diagram here, and we can see we have a web browser, and we see HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, WebGL. All that stuff is on the client side, though. So this is where we're sitting when we're sitting at our computer typing in the browser. And what happens is we type in a web address, www.mycoolwebsite.com, and we go through the internet, we bounce through a bunch of routers, and we eventually reach the web server associated with that URL. And for a simple HTML request, the web server has an HTML page that we send back through the internet into the web browser, as well as any images and any CSS information and things like that. And our browser assembles it very quickly and shows us the results there. Now with JavaScript, what happens is those instructions are stored on the web server, they're sent through the internet, our browser, and they're executed here on the client side. So JavaScript and jQuery and other client-side languages are ideal for when we have stuff that's decentralized. Imagine this only shows one client. Imagine this is the case where we show three clients all connected to the internet and connecting to a server, or imagine 20 or 100 or 200. If we can decentralize and not have the server run those instructions, but rather run them on the client, that works a lot better. Plus, for some of the game examples that we do, if we have something where we press the left arrow on this computer, we want to locally work with that. We don't want to send that instructions through the internet to the server. The server tells us move the character 5 pixels to the right and sends that back. That would slow things down a lot. It can be a lot more efficient if we're working locally. So for the most part, JavaScript's great. Now there's a couple tasks, the ones that we're going to focus on in this video series, where we need to use PHP in a web server environment. So we're going to use XAMPP, which the A in XAMPP stands for Apache, and that has support for PHP and MySQL. And we'll show how to do that. Now that's typically needed when we have centralized tasks, which in our case is we're first going to do a simple counter that keeps track of how many times has a page been downloaded from this web server. And then eventually we'll get into creating a high scoreboard of keeping track of high scores and updating it. So people can play the game here, and when they're done, submit their initials and their score and update here on the web server their information, and we can list the top, in this example, the top 10 scores. So that's sort of the difference between a client-side language and a server-side. So think about anytime we have to centralize or have a database that just one database that everyone access, it has to be on the server side. Also, if we have we're sending a username and password. We type it in here, we send it, and then we check on the server side. Does that username exist? Yes or no? And if it does, is the password they sent correct? If it is, we send them back the page that shows their email or their bank account or whatever, and if it isn't, then we send back the message that says sorry, invalid password. So that's another example of stuff that needs to be on the server side that we have here. Now, one of the problems that we have with Tumult Hype, one of the nice things that we get used to is if it's just JavaScript and HTML, we can upload this through the internet to Dropbox.com. That's integrated into Tumult Hype. And that works great if we just have to then send HTML and CSS and JavaScript and some images into a web browser. The disadvantage of that is that Dropbox.com does not support an Apache web server. So if we want to do any kind of PHP commands, we won't be able to do that. So we have two potential solutions. One of them is to go to GoDaddy or a similar service and buy a web space, and then FTP all of our stuff up on there, make sure it's running Apache and has PHP and MySQL running, and do our examples that way. The second option that we have is XAMPP. XAMPP can be downloaded from apachefriends.org, and we have versions for Windows, Linux, and Mac. I've already downloaded the Mac version. I'm going to go through the installation for that and show how to get that up and running. And this will set up a server on our client-side computer here. Now this is going to be on our side, on the intranet, not internet, side of the firewall. So it's all kind of local, and we can go and get things tested and worked out here, but then when we want to go live for the whole world to see it, then we're going to have to go with that second solution of getting a hosting solution through GoDaddy or one of those other kinds of places. So I've already downloaded this. You just click right there. It downloads pretty quick. I'm going to run through the install on a Mac real quick. So I'm just going to click right there. Just going to go through our install, ask me for my password. There we go. And this will take a minute or two. And while it's installing, I'll mention a couple of other things. Let me see, I can go and dump this file right there. XAMPP, the A stands for, oops, let me just hit the setup, next. Notice it's going to go in my applications directory under XAMPP. Next. I get the Bitnami. Tells us all about it. You can read more there. And next. There we go. So setup, okay, so setup took a little bit longer than anticipated, but we're done here. At the very end, we get this, and we're just going to choose Launch XAMPP. So I'll just say Finish. And we can see that this starts up. It kind of shows, here's our local XAMPP installation. And if I just type in localhost, it goes to the dashboard and we can see this. A couple things to notice, lots of documentation. Here's the PHP info. If we click that, localhost /dashboard/php info.php tells us about the version here. And if I click on PHP MyAdmin, this is often where, oops, MySQL isn't running. But this is where we can configure our database and things like that. We're not going to get into that in this particular session. So a couple things. Here is the XAMPP setup. I'm going to go to the second tab, Manage Servers, and if we wanted to, we could start MySQL. I'm not going to, but we got a green light here, which means it's running. I'm going to minimize this, but over here in the dock, I'm going to right-click and just say Keep in Dock, so it's always there. Now, if I go into my Applications directory, we can see there's XAMPP. And inside, here's if I want to click, that's to start the XAMPP interface where I can basically see the stuff here. And we can see quite a few directories, including htdocs. This is where all of our files have to go. Now, we're going to use this a lot, so what I like to do is I like to drag this down here and put it in my doc file right there. So we can see here are all the files in htdocs. Right now it's going to look for index.php, and that's the one that gives us our dashboard. Now watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go into the files I've downloaded. I'm going to copy part 1, copy, and paste it here. So now inside htdocs we have part 1, and inside there we have an index file and page2.php, as well as a couple of figures that we have right there. So if I go to my browser and I type in localhost /part1 /, we can see that first file gets displayed. Now we'll go over this file in just a second. We can also alternatively type in 127.0.0.1 /part1 and see that same file. So localhost is usually easier for people to remember. But when I type in localhost again, I'm going to start in my htdocs directory and start looking for either an index file, or in this case I typed in localhost /part1 and I start looking for these files. Now index.php, let's take a look at this file real quick with Text Wrangler. Let me bump up the font size just a little bit. 18 is good enough. So we can see the first 11 lines or so of this is just regular old HTML and a little bit of CSS here. So we've got some colors and things like that. HTML, head, title, style, head, body. And then we end with body and HTML. Between these two sections we have our PHP. So notice we have this tag less than $PHP, and then eventually we have this tag $greater than, and we have some PHP commands. Now I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on PHP. I'm just going to cover some of the basics. One of the best resources out there is the W3 Schools, and if we go down to tutorials, on, where's Learn PHP. So this is a really good reference for a lot of commands and things like that. Of course, there's tons of books and other videos out there for PHP in much greater detail, but this is a great resource. So what we have here is an echo command, and then we're echoing a paragraph tag, but inside it we're getting the date, and we're going to get the hours, minutes, and seconds, as well as the month, date, and year, and echo that back. And then we're going to set the time zone to be, I'm currently in St. Paul, Minnesota. We'll set it to America, Chicago. That's the central time zone. And echo back the local time and date. So all this is being done through our PHP server. So you can see the page, when we run it, looks something like that. Now that was processed, those commands, echo and date default time zone set, were all processed on the server and delivered to the client. In this case, it's on the same computer. But if I go and inspect this page and look at my source code, oops, I won't use that one, I'll just say view page source, you can see everything that we have right here. We just have a paragraph tag, another paragraph tag, and these are the echo commands, the results of that echo command that we have right there. So that's the first example. We also have a file called page2.php, and it's very, very simple. It looks like this. View text display, show fonts, let's make it bigger. So pretty much the same stuff right here, and then I just show how we can do a very simple variable operation. I set a variable x1 equal to 2, x2 is equal to 5, x3 equals to x1 plus x2, and then I say echo $x1 plus $x2 is equal to $3. Please check out the PHP section at w3schools.com for more info. So that is called page2.php. So if I open up my browser and I go to, I'll do it the other way, localhost / part1 / page2.php, we can see here's what we got from the first part, and then we just says 2 plus 5 is equal to 7. Check out the PHP section for more information. So the processing was done on the server and then sent here. And again, if we go and inspect, look at our page source, we can see the last part here. 2 plus 5 is equal to 7. We don't see any of the echo commands or anything like that. All that was processed on the server, generated this, and sent to the client. So that concludes kind of the first part that we have here. In part 2, we're going to take a look at setting up a simple counter. Thank you, and have a good day.